You might remember this photo. My son, 22 months old, standing on one of the most dangerous volcanoes in America. I took it 13 years ago, on the day that started everything for our family. Here's what I didn't know that day. About 500 years ago, this mountain moved. No eruption, maybe no warning at all. A wall of mud taller than a 10-story building came off its flank and buried the valley where a town now sits, and scientists just figured out exactly the year it happened. We're a family on a mission to see all 63 American national parks before each of my kids goes off to college. This episode, we're going back to where it all started, Mount Rainier, the mountain that built itself, destroyed itself, and it also got this whole adventure started for our family. Mount Rainier National Park, 60 miles southeast of Seattle in the heart of the Cascade Range. The elevation of the mountain is 14,410 feet, the tallest volcano in the Cascades, and the most prominent peak in the lower 48. Everest's summit is higher, but Everest stands on a plateau. Measured from the ground, at its own foot, Rainier rises more. The national park is 369 square miles, bigger than New York City, 97% of it designated wilderness. America's fifth national park, signed in 1899. It carries more than 24 named glaciers, as much ice as all the other Cascade volcanoes combined, and 6 rivers are born on this one mountain. Oh, and it's still active. 500,000 years ago, this mountain started building itself, eruption by eruption, layer by layer, on the bones of an even older volcano. By about 6,000 years ago, it stood somewhere around 16,000 feet, taller than anything in the lower 48 today. And then, about 5,600 years ago, the top of the mountain let go. Geologists call it the Osceola Mudflow. For centuries, acid and steam had been rotting the summit from the inside, turning the top of the mountain into weak, waterlogged rock. During an eruption, the whole northeast side of the summit broke loose, close to a cubic mile of rock and ice. Within about 2 miles, it had become a wall of mud, moving like wet concrete, over 300 feet deep, taller than a 30-story building, doing 40 miles an hour. It poured down the White River and didn't stop until it reached Puget Sound, 75 miles away, near where Auburn sits today. The mountain lost about 1,600 feet of its summit in a single day. The mud that was left behind is still there today. 6 towns in the lowland are built partly or entirely on top of old Rainier mudflows. About 150,000 people live on the deposits. The ground under their schools and grocery stores is the old summit of Mount Rainier. And it has happened since. Just this past January, scientists published a study of dead trees buried in one of those flows. Tree rings record every year of growth, so when the mud entombed a forest, it froze the calendar. The verdict? The summer of 1507. A wall of mud 100 feet deep came down the Puyallup Valley, and as far as anyone can tell, the volcano never erupted. A piece of the mountain, rotted soft by centuries of acid and steam, simply let go. The town of Orting sits on 20 feet of that one. The USGS puts numbers on this. A big lahar has reached the lowland roughly every 500 to 1,000 years, which works out to about a 1 in 10 chance of it happening again in an average human lifetime. Those are uncomfortable odds when 90,000 people live in the path. So when the mountain started shaking last summer, scientists noticed. Between July and August of 2025, instruments recorded over 1,300 earthquakes under the summit, the largest swarm ever measured at Rainier. At its peak, 41 quakes in a single hour. And nobody felt a single one of them. 1,300 quakes, and not one person on the mountain felt a thing because it wasn't magma moving. It was just hot water working through the rock. All summer, the alert level stayed green. This may be the best watched volcano on Earth. Dozens of stations listen to it around the clock. Seismometers, tripwires, cameras, and sensors that can hear a mudflow coming. Sirens line the valleys from Orting to Tahoma, and in 2024, 45,000 school kids ran the largest lahar evacuation drill in world history. Kids there practice walking to high ground the way kids in Kansas practice tornado drills. The mountain moves with almost no warning, so people below complete drills to make sure they're ready. So knowing all of that, why would a brand new dad strap a not quite 2-year-old into a car and drive him up that exact mountain? On a clear day in Seattle, you can see Rainier standing out on the horizon, and I'd known for a while that I wanted to make the trip to see it. In June of 2013, we had 2 kids under 2, and I was working long hours at Amazon while Dimple was home with the kids. So one Saturday, I packed some snacks, loaded up Colton, and drove to the mountain. Partly to give my wife a break and let her spend some rare time with just our daughter, and partly because I wanted my kids to grow up in places like this. We had a picnic in the back of our car. He said goodbye to every stranger in the parking lot.
Bye!
And he learned a new word that day.
Mountain!
Yeah, mountain.
Mountain!
That's the whole origin story. No grand plan. There were 59 parks then, and I wasn't even thinking about seeing them all yet.
Yeah.
Now look at our photos from that day. Every single photo of the mountain has the same strange cloud sitting on the summit like a lid. That's called a lenticular cloud. Rainier is so massive, it makes its own weather. It forces wet Pacific air upward into standing waves that condense into those smooth, saucer-shaped lids. In 1947, a pilot flying near this mountain reported 9 objects that moved. He said, like a saucer if you skipped it across water. He was describing how they flew, but the newspapers grabbed the word and coined a brand new phrase, flying saucer. Nobody ever did figure out what he saw. The guesses ranged from a mirage to a flock of birds to clouds shaped exactly like these. Either way, the flying saucer was born right there. All that captured weather has to land somewhere. In the winter of 71 to 72, Paradise, the exact spot where Colton stood, recorded 1,122 inches of snow, 93.5 feet, a world record at the time. That's why our June photos are full of families sledding. Snow that deep doesn't all melt. It compresses into ice, and ice becomes glaciers. Emmons on the east face is the largest glacier in the contiguous United States. Carbon on the north side is the thickest, 700 feet, and crawls lower into the forest than any glacier in the lower 48. And the ice is alive. Billions of thread-thin black worms live inside these glaciers, ice worms. They rise to the surface on summer evenings to graze on algae, and if the temperature climbs much past 40 degrees, they don't overheat, they liquefy. Quite possibly the only animals on Earth that live their whole lives inside ice. Up at Paradise lives one of the rarest mammals in America, the Cascade red fox. For 15 years, biologists have tracked them by the DNA in their droppings and turned up just 51 individual foxes in the whole southern Cascades. We didn't see one. We did meet the deer, though, twice. Colton supervised from the backpack. All of it, the worms, the foxes, the salmon in those rivers, the farms and faucets downstream, runs on that ice. And the ice is leaving. Since 1896, Rainier's glaciers have lost more than 40% of their area. 3 of them have been declared dead just in the last 5 years. And in 2024, surveyors found the ice cap at the very summit has melted down so far that the mountain's highest point isn't ice anymore. It's a knob of bare rock on the crater rim. The mountain is literally shorter than it was the day Colton stood on it. Here's a photo of Colton from later that afternoon, down in the forest at Longmire. If you look closely at his eye, you can see a tear. A minute before this, he'd been climbing on that big log with a stick. He slipped off and bumped his head. He cried for a little bit. And in the very next picture, he was smiling again. That's pretty much the whole toddler experience right there in 2 photos. One more story, and it starts with a question that sounds simple. What is the mountain's name? In 1792, the British captain George Vancouver sailed into Puget Sound, looked up at the biggest thing on the horizon, and named it for a friend back home, a Navy officer called Peter Rainier. Rainier never saw the mountain. He never even came out west. In fact, the one time history connects him to America at all, he was shooting at it. He fought against the colonies in the Revolutionary War and was wounded capturing an American ship. So the tallest volcano in the lower 48 is named for an enemy officer who never laid eyes on it. The people who had lived under this mountain for 10,000 years already had names for it, at least 20 of them across 7 languages. Tahoma, Tacoma, in the language of the Puyallup, Tacoma, the mother of all waters. Remember the 6 rivers? They knew. And they took the mountain seriously in ways the newcomers didn't. In 1870, when 2 climbers named Hazard Stevens and Philemon Van Trump set out to make the first recorded summit, their guide, a Yakima man named Sluiskin, warned them that an angry spirit lived in a lake of fire at the top, and that it would kill them. They went anyway. They reached the crater at nightfall, too late to climb down, and survived the night only because steam vents in the summit kept them warm, scalding on one side, freezing on the other, until dawn. A century and a half later, explorers finally mapped what's actually inside Rainier's summit, the largest volcanic ice cave system on Earth, wrapped around a hidden lake beneath the crater ice, quite possibly the highest lake in North America. Sluiskin warned them about a lake at the top of the mountain. There is a lake at the top of the mountain. The fight over the name never really ended. Seattle and Tacoma feuded over Rainier versus Tacoma for decades. At the 1893 World's Fair, a fistfight reportedly broke out over a map. Congress took it up more than once and blinked every time. And it's still live today. In 2021, the Puyallup tribe launched a campaign to restore the name Tahoma. And last year they published the first complete study of every native name this mountain carries. Whatever your map says, the oldest name here was never a man's. It belongs entirely to the landscape, the mother of all waters. In this portion of the video, I'm going to give some insights into things like the best hikes, when to go, what to skip, and the overall kind of difficulty of the park. And then after that, I'm going to introduce the rating scale for the parks. So there are a few dimensions that we rate the park on, and what is the overall rating for that park. So there are a few hikes that I would recommend, and we didn't do all of them because, of course, I had a 22-month-old with me. There's the Trail of the Shadows. It's a 0.7-mile hike, and it's at Longmire. That's the one that's actually in the video, and you saw Colton climbing on the logs and where he fell. It's a really nice trail. It's got a few different things to see, like and that's also where the deer were. So I would recommend that. That's on the very easy side. It's just 0.7 miles. It's very flat, but the views are really great. So one that's kind of in the middle is Skyline Loop at Paradise. That one is supposed to be very beautiful, but in June, it's covered in snow, as you saw in the pictures. But later in the year, in July and August, that's supposed to be a really beautiful part of the mountain. You can see the wildflowers and things like that. John Muir called the wildflowers that you can see there extravagantly beautiful. And for the very adventurous, there's something called the Wonderland Trail that is 93 miles long, and it goes around the mountain. That one would be an amazing hike, and if you have the time and the ability to do it, that's definitely one that you would want to do. But that takes multiple days, so you really have to plan for that one. So great hiking on this mountain. So a couple of things to skip. One would be the Grove of the Patriarchs, and it's not because it's not a great place to see, but there was a suspension bridge that was washed out and it hasn't been rebuilt, so you just can't get there. And the other thing to avoid is the park in general if the day is a really cloudy, overcast day, because you can't see the peak. And that's one of the biggest reasons to go there, is to see the view of the top of the mountain. So there are, of course, things you can do even if it is overcast, and there's a lot of beautiful wildlife and things to see, but you really want to see it on a day where it's not overcast. And when to go? Some of the best times to go are late July and through August because of the wildflowers. The wildflowers are kind of peaking around then. And if you really want to try to miss some of the crowds, then the best times to go would be early in the morning if you go on the weekend, because the parking lots do fill up pretty quickly, or during the week when the Seattle crowds, the people that are kind of native to the area and visiting the mountain from Seattle, are not there. So during the week or early in the morning on the weekends. And as far as the difficulty of the park, this is kind of an interesting one because it's really whatever you want it to be. You saw that I brought a 22-month-old and we had a great day. We had a lot of fun on that day. So that's possible. You can bring a little kid, but you can also do some extreme things like go to the summit. So as far as the difficulty of the park, it's definitely whatever you want it to be. Very easy to extreme. Now we're going to go through some ratings. There are 5 different dimensions that I'm going to rate every park on, and as soon as I can get input from the kids where they were old enough to remember, they're going to be a part of the rating system. But until then, it'll be me providing these ratings for you with the experiences that we had and some research as well. So the first dimension that I'm going to be rating is the wow factor. And what that really means is when you first see it, or even multiple places in the park, what is that wow factor? How much does it amaze you? And for this one in particular, there's a huge wow factor. You don't even have to be in the park to actually experience that. If you ever go to Seattle, you can at least partially experience the wow factor just from the flight when you're landing, if it's a clear day. So this one, I actually give an A. You would say maybe why wouldn't you give it an S? And the reason really is that it's overcast quite often in certain parts of the season. So it probably would be an S if it was a clear day all the time, or if it was clear more often. But there's a lot of weather there, and the chances of you missing that view can be quite high depending on the time of year that it is. So this one gets a solid A for the wow factor. So the second dimension is the kid factor. And what this is measuring is, it's not really can you bring kids there, because you can bring kids to any of these parks. Some are more difficult to get to than others. It's really more about, once the kids are there fun things for them to do? And for this park, for Mount Rainier, I give it a B. And the reason is, there is a lot to do. There's hikes, as you saw. There's sledding even, if you wanted to do that, even in June. But some of the highlights of the park are things that are really not for kind of younger children. Like the trail that I mentioned that goes all the way around the mountain, the Wonderland Trail. And even summiting the peak, you're definitely, of course, not going to bring a toddler to the top of the mountain. The next dimension is adventure. And for this one, it's not just how adventurous you can be, because there is a lot of adventure to be had on this one, and it still gets a very good rating, by the way. But this is how varied are the adventures as well. So for this one, there's a lot of adventure to be had. As I mentioned, you can do cross-country skiing, snowshoeing. You can try to summit the peak if you wanted to and be very adventurous, all the way down to the smaller trails that we did. But everything is focused on this one mountain, so the activities aren't as varied as some other parks. So this, as far as adventure goes, this gets a solid B. The next dimension is solitude. There are some parks that are extremely beautiful and very crowded, and there are some parks that are extremely beautiful and not crowded. So this one is really rating how big the crowds are. And for this one, Mount Rainier gets a C because it's ranked about 16th for the number of visitors that go to the mountain, but the visitors that do go to the mountain are really in 3 months. So July, August, and September are the primary months when people go to that mountain. So it's number 16th, but they go in 3 months, so it's very crowded. And the reason for that is Seattle is just an hour away, which makes it nice and easy to get to, but it also makes it so that the crowds can get there very easily too. So if you go during those months, you do have to plan on contending with some crowds, especially at Paradise, which is kind of the main attraction for a lot of the visitors. So the last dimension is only here, and it's really the uniqueness of the place. Is there another place like this really on Earth? And for Mount Rainier, it gets an A because of all the things that I went through throughout the video. There's the glaciers on top, the most glaciated peak in the lower 48. There's the ice caves within those glaciers, and there's the lake at the top of the mountain. So there's a lot of things that are somewhat unique. It's very unique in the lower 48, and there are other places in the world that have similar things. So A is a very high rating, and that's what it gets for the uniqueness or only here. So now I want to kind of explain my logic for the overall rating for these parks. One of the most common things that I get asked whenever I mention the goal of going to all of the 63 and whenever I mention the number of parks that I've been to, people say, well, what's the best? And that's, of course, a very hard thing to answer. But through the different dimensions we're rating, this is kind of a way to get there. And I do want to say right up front that it's very hard to give almost any of the parks anything below an A. But what we're going to do is reserve S for, 2 or 3 parks out of all 63. And then A's maybe about 10. And then, B's, that's where kind of, I would say the average is going to be most likely. And then C is a little below average. And then there won't be that many below that probably, but there will be some. So with that said, Mount Rainier gets a B. This was actually very hard for me to decide on because I really wanted to give it an A. And I do realize that, some of these ratings can be pretty emotionally charged for some people. So we can debate this in the comments too. So that does it for Rainier. A very solid B and almost makes it into the A tier. It's an amazing mountain that I do highly recommend that anybody that's able to does make the trip, especially if you can go in the summertime. So that does it for Mount Rainier. First on the board, a very solid B. Next, we're going to be covering Olympic National Park, which is almost like 3 different parks in one. You've got glaciers at the top, you've got rainforests that get about 10 feet of rain a year, and you have 73 miles of coastline. So if you want to see that one and all 61 left, please subscribe. We're just getting started.